There's the sort of natural wetlands. My wife's from Somerset, so I'm quite very familiar with the Somerset levels and the coastal wetlands. But most of the wetlands I know are like this one, which are gravel pits that have been restored as wetlands, which I think is a brilliant idea in an area, particularly in an area like this where there wouldn't have been much in the way of wetlands in the past.
Well, I suppose thinking of an area like this where there's sort of an area of natural countryside, probably involves lakes, rivers, and all the flora and fauna that go with that.
In this county, it can be anything from, or it's nearly all due to mineral extraction. There are hardly, I think, probably only one natural lake, if that, in the whole of Bedfordshire.
It's on the devastation left by the largest, what was once the largest brickworks in the world.
I always associate it as a wildlife area where people can go or look or walk around, you know, with special interests really.
I always imagine it's a little bit unkempt, lakes, rivers, streams, lots and lots of birds, and just somewhere we can walk really nicely.
I'd always thought of wetlands as sort of marshy, boggy areas, as opposed to the wider context of the lakes, the rivers, the whole eco type system that we have. And of course we're very fortunate in Bedford that we have a wonderful river, and even more fortunate that we've got a lake here within the town, within a country park. So my views now on wetlands have changed in that it is the whole thing as opposed to just a sort of a boggy, marshy area.
I first started coming down here in the early 70s, before the marina was anything like a marina. It was just a gravel pit, and we'd come down here and we'd swim in the pits. And there are still people in Bedford that call this place the pits.
I started here when it wasn't particularly well known. I mean, there were very few bird watchers. It was just a small group of us before it was made into a country park. And when I first came here, there was no water in the lake at all.
When we were like 10 or 11 years of age, my mum and lots of her friends, they'd be picked in the summer holidays. We picked up in a big van with like wooden seats in it, and all the children would get in there with their mothers, and we'd come over here and potato pick.
We used to paddle down the cut in kayaks before the Ouse was navigable, and we'd stop at the outlet from the cooling towers and warm our hands up in the warm water coming out of the cooling towers.
We used to leave our list of birds in a bottle by the entrance, which was hidden. So we used to, as we left, as we arrived, we'd look in the bottle to see what somebody else had had, and then when we left, we wrote in and put it in a bottle near the entrance. So that was how it was done, before we had a notice board.
It was mostly farmland. There was a great big, before tidy tips, big dump of domestic waste, but mostly farmland and just wasteland really in between the farms, yeah. No lakes like this it is now, no prettiness.
My dad used to tell me about how kind of this all used to be fields at one stage, so he worked as a farmer. My grandfather worked as a kind of estate manager of those farms, and obviously they told me about like the brickworks and the chimneys. When I was going to school in Stuartby, there used to be a lot more chimneys as well. So we've had like the whole history, the industrial history kind of, we've very much like grown up in it. And seen the park develop as well. When I was really young, all of the trees used to be very small, all kind of like saplings, so I've kind of seen it develop into what it is today.
As a ranger on a site, you get quite emotionally attached to the site because you spend a lot of time working hard. You get quite protective over it. You see it develop. You see good things and bad things happen on sites, and I often sort of think of it as an extension of my own back garden, which can make me sort of overly protective sometimes.
When I was looking for a house, I came to look at this area and I thought, well, it's right next to this park. This is where I want to live. The house is all right as well. I mean, I basically live on a housing estate, but this makes it not like a housing estate because you've got this massive extra garden, but a really interesting garden.
I feel really attached to Priory Country Park more than any other wetlands. I do enjoy wetlands, and I would most likely go out of my way to walk around a wetland if I had a choice. But particularly this one holds a special place in my heart.
I think it's very much part of my life. It's I suppose I would sometimes even call it my park.
Live local to here, in Bedfordshire. Lived here virtually all my life and had ponies virtually all my life.
We've always had ponies all our lives, so that's how we met years and years and years ago.
It's not just something that we do. It's
it's
deeper than that.
They will go down into the reed beds and paddle in there, and it makes a nice area for the nesting birds when they come in. I was really excited about the whole thing, the fact that we've been accepted to graze the ponies. It was just lovely. And I have to say, every year, we love it. I'm emotional now.
I've got a connection that goes way back to my teens. And coming back here in the summer, the smell of the water, the sound of the wind in the rigging on the boats, it's just a fantastic place to be. This little corner of the club, I can come down here, I've put a little landing stage in, I can sit here in the reeds, in the sunshine, and just watch the birds. And tucked away in this corner, no one knows I'm here. And it's not like sitting out in public in the park, because I'm sheltered and I'm hidden, and it's fantastic.
There's lots of people, it's not just myself, there's lots of people come here for the wildlife. There's lots of people come here for the bird life because there's a couple of 100 species used here. I specialise in bats. We've got 10 out of the 12 species in Bedfordshire using this area. Here you don't necessarily go looking for it. Sit down for half an hour and it comes to you.
I was like right over near Millbrook Station, and there was this really strange noise coming out of the reed beds. Whip, 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 whip. And that turned out to be a spotted crake. we've never had one here before. So yeah, and that all I heard, I never saw the bird, never even attempted to see it. It was just that noise. It was really exciting.
The first time I saw a kingfisher was like over there, and it was just a flash of orange and blue, and I was so intrigued at this point. I was quite young, didn't know exactly what it was, but I was like, how can there be such an exotic bird here?
Kingfishers literally fly a foot or so off the water, and it's a streak of blue going past. There's lots of grebes. Currently there's several about, and watching them doing their little mating ritual is quite something. And it warms the heart almost, you know, think, oh, how lovely, you know. Hope it works out for the pair of you, you know.
A couple of years ago that I had been, this swan and its mate had been sort of visiting me. I'd been down to see them every day, and they'd been sitting on their nest, and I felt one day when I was down here, and the young had just been born and now out on the water for their first trip, that she actually brought them over to me, and I was just sitting down, and normally they're very, very protective, but she let the little cygnet sort of run around me, and I could touch them. You know, it was a very touching moment, almost bringing a little tear to my eyes now.
One of the things we were looking for desperately was a harvest mouse, and we've caught one on 4 occasions. The very first occasion we caught them, I was doing it with my 2 colleagues, Diane and Kat, and we're pretty sure it was a harvest mouse. And then we phoned Anna, who was the chief ranger for this place, and she came down at high speed on her pickup truck, and we confirmed that it was. And I've got a little video of it with the girls going, ooh, and ah, and ee. And that was a very special occasion.
I remember actually dancing by a reed bed the day that we first caught a harvest mouse in one of the live traps. We knew they were around, hadn't seen them. I'd never seen one in my life.
Love being in the open countryside. It's just nice to get out there, go and check the ponies, bit of peace and quiet, nothing around but animals, and yeah, the wildlife. Yeah,
particularly, you know, if it's a bit of a cold, brisk day and you've got to walk a long way away, right across there, you don't really mind because there's so much to see, and it's just lovely.
I think it's a great educational resource here. From just well, you can hear the birds behind you, redshanks and oyster catchers and geese and that, and people that maybe can't get to places where these birds exist can actually come a short distance from Milton Keynes, Luton, Marston, Bedford, and see some of these birds, or otherwise they've got to go right to the coast. So it's really important from that point of view. Great for bird watchers who just come here and bird watch, and probably learn a lot as well, but also great for the general public to get a taste of nature really, and wetlands.
Being out in the wetlands tends to be very relaxing. You listen to what's around and it can help de-stress. So you're back out with nature, you're listening to the birds, you're hearing what's going on around you. It gives you that sense that you're out of the way, you're disconnected from the stress of everyday life.
One of the things that I do with my walkers sometimes is we just close our eyes and tune in to something that's not a man-made sound. So when you do that, when you close your eyes, the first thing you can hear is the traffic, and then that becomes less, and then you can hear the birds and everything else. So, and people really find that just that 1 minute that we do that really helps their well-being.
It's a very peaceful place, and I think it's nice to have somewhere like this so near. So if you're feeling, I don't know, in a bad mood or you've had a bad day, it's very nice to come somewhere that's like this, because I think being in the fresh air is very soothing. The colours are very soothing as well, you know, as you see the green, the blossoms, looking at the birds on the lake. I think it's a good place to come to keep your mood up.
Don't have to go very far to go out for a nice walk, almost regardless of the weather. I don't particularly mind if it's going to rain because I've got good waterproofs. and you know, as I say, just seeing the birds and the wildlife sort of lifts you.
Even when I feel like I'm really wound up and nothing can possibly help, I'll go on a walk, and in the first 10 minutes of it I'll still be wound up, but you just slowly realise that you're feeling okay, and by the end of it I've come back refreshed, and it's not like anything, any of the pressures of life or whatever have changed. It's just that the perspective on it has kind of eased. I don't know, there's something about the environment, I think just being in nature generally, that kind of helps give you a space to breathe.
There's just no better place to be. If you're feeling a bit down, come to the park and just listen to the bird life. It's nothing better.
If you're walking around the water, and sometimes it's just such an amazing colour blue, and you can't help just to say to somebody, doesn't that lake look beautiful today? And so I think it would be a way of getting to start a conversation with somebody.
They do lots of charity runs around here, midnight walks looking for bats, looking for bird walks, looking for different species. It's a real community.
You can always come here and sit here. There'll always be other people around you, so you don't have to be isolated, because you can always come and sit here. It doesn't cost anything, the parking's free, it's beautifully maintained, and so it's accessible to everybody.
My wife unfortunately died 12 years ago, and I miss her very much, and but this place at Marston Vale really saved my life, because we had come here on bird walks and did a little bit of volunteering, but after she died I came and started volunteering seriously here, and as I say, it saved my life. It's wonderful. I've made so many friends.
There's so many people that are kind of involved with this site on so many different levels, and it could be everything from the kind of daily dog walker that says, oh, I noticed that this has happened and you might want to go and have a look at it, through to people that are doing moth trapping here, that are doing practical work. So and everyone is passionate about it. So I suppose it sounds a bit corny, it's that family thing. It kind of sort of, we're all in it because we believe in what we're doing.
I feel I'm not on my own, I belong here.
When I first started coming down here, it was really on doctor's suggestion that I walk and that, just to get over a slip disc. And yes, I mean, I originally started walking just locally around near my house, but you know, you could come here and actually see some wildlife as well at the same time, and enjoy the environment.
Physically, it gets you out every day, you're doing your walk every day, so you're out for an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, which is good, even though it's a stroll with the dogs. It's just really, it's just a nice feeling. But you see the joggers go past and the cyclists goes past and the mums running with their buggies, so it's as I say, a nice feeling.
I wouldn't go walking around the streets, that would be really boring. No, around here is so good. Even when there's parts that are muddy, you know, you get your boots on, and it doesn't matter if boots get muddy, dog gets muddy. It can all be cleaned off, can't it? So that doesn't put me off at all. The only time I don't get all the way around is if it's flooded.
I got into Nordic walking because I'd got a slip disc, and so these poles really helped me to get back walking. And I've seen so many people with their mental and physical health improve so much. So people that think their walking days are over find that actually they've got a new lease of life, and so it's really good, because it's almost like they've had a second chance. They know how much walking and nature means to them.
When I get home, as I said before, I'm very often shattered, but the thing is, I recover the next day when I've had a good night's sleep and ready to come back for more.
Mosquitoes here are very rare. On occasions you get big swarms of midges. but only in particular locations, it seems. But mosquitoes that bite you, no, hardly ever.
To me, they've never been a problem. You're aware of them, but they're not really no, they're just in sometimes they're just another insect that might bite you. That's my thoughts. You watch out for the horseflies and you watch out for things that are biting you. And mosquito, in my mind, is part of that.
I'm very aware that they're here. Occasionally get bitten. If I'm out doing back walks, I tend to use a repellent to prevent being bitten. But I haven't had any major problems. You just accept that it's one of the things that happens. You're outside, so you're in with nature, just like sometimes you get stung by wasps.
It's just part of the environment. They've got every right to be here as much as we have, so yeah, I don't really see a problem.
Mosquitoes tend not to bother us as far as the water sports go. The horseflies are much more of a problem here because of the geese and the amount of muck that gets left on the beach. I'm sure I used to get bitten more often when I was a child.
There used to be quite a nuisance there. There were quite big swarms of them 20 years ago or so, which they're not now. It's just the occasional one or two in comparison to what they used to be. So yes, so much less of a problem than they were. But that seems to be possibly related to the total lack of insects that we're experiencing anyhow.
One of the things that is quite concerning is the drop-off in insects in general in the world. So if we do lose all of our insects or significant numbers of insects, it can have a major impact on the species that feed on them.
I love mosquitoes. The more mosquitoes we have here, the better. You know, really, and that's all insects. But you know, I'm convinced that one of the biggest problems facing and I'm really passionate about birds, our bird life, certainly farmland birds and wetland birds, is the lack of insects. So I don't want them to bring diseases here, and that would be a real problem. But you know, we can combat that with modern day medicine and drugs. But yeah. If we could have more insects, that would be absolutely fantastic.
In the summer, we do get a lot of mosquitoes in the garden, but it doesn't really bother me. I guess because, you know, I've been in countries where malaria is really rife, and to me, mosquitoes here, even though it's a kind of a bit of a nuisance, it doesn't feel like it's dangerous, so I don't really worry about that.
We're lucky that at the moment our mosquitoes aren't carrying any serious diseases and that, but which could make a big difference if something like malaria arrived on the doorstep or some of the other mosquito-borne diseases, then things might change a bit.
Obviously disease spread, I mean with equine you get a lot of worry with diseases spreading coming from abroad, transporting them, so we're always on the watch out.
We're fortunate that none of our ponies suffer from sweet itch, which is an allergy reaction to the mosquito saliva, bites. So we're lucky in that respect, but ponies that do suffer from it is quite bad.
I think the concern around mosquitoes is if they were here in great numbers, and the potential of disease. You know, we saw this, you know, horrible disease in places such as, you know, parts of South America, you know, in Brazil, the Zika virus. You know, if that was to spread to, you know, to Europe and then into the UK, you know, that could have devastating consequences really for, you know, for us as humans.
We need to be very careful at the moment because you know, going back to, I think, just the 19th century, people suffered from the ague. I think Hackney around there was, and Romney Marshes because of the mosquitoes. The ague is just a form of malaria, and I think if with global warming, I think it's going to be, malaria could be a risk factor again. But draining wetlands to prevent it happening is not the answer, I'm sure.
I know people are worried that as climate change happens that we might get more mosquitoes, and they're afraid that they're a vector for disease, but so are lots of other things. So it doesn't unduly worry me.
Often with things like that, the media portrays a different story than the one is actually accurate. So I can imagine headlines would be quite alarmist and people would be freaking out about what could potentially happen when actually the risk, I imagine, would be quite minimal.
I do think mosquitoes have to be controlled because, you know, the way that we were getting rid of malaria worldwide, I think we would see problems again with that perhaps if mosquitoes started coming back and spreading infection.
I am aware that some of the chemicals that have been used to destroy mosquitoes really can do other damage, so I would hope that there's research going on, so if that were to be the case, then we've got a solution in waiting.
You get a bit of antisocial behaviour over here. Kids coming over, particularly in the evenings, and they go up to Tower Hyde and they've had parties and fires and things up there. So yeah, there is a little bit of that. And I think it could possibly put some people off.
Dog walking and dogs not being kept under appropriate control is probably the biggest source of complaints, whether it's dog fouling or dogs just running around doing their thing and not being under appropriate control.
We had quite a significant problem with crayfish nets and otters getting trapped in them. I think we lost at least 5 animals that I can remember.
We are having a waste disposal site over here, which is at the corner of the wetlands. I mean, you just have a little worry at the back of your mind that I hope it doesn't cause the pollution and the sickness and ill health that the brickworks left.
The whole area of Bedfordshire, particularly this kind of corridor, is kind of prime for development because there's a lot of arable land, and so I've seen kind of the development of the Marston Park housing estate and planned developments for houses in the surrounding area.
Housing and sort of local populations are always increasing, particularly around here. I mean, there's a proposal just on the border of the park for another 5,000 houses.
You can see in days to come the whole of Bedford to Milton Keynes will be one long urban sprawl.
It's something which I kind of feel is inevitable. People need somewhere to live, but it makes me a little kind of sad to see the landscape changing.
It's happening in a small way now and it's going to continue, so it's inevitable almost. Shame, but it's a good reason for making sure this stays like it is or it grows even more.
There's too many people who are just looking at things in monetary terms and they don't really understand wild or wetland areas in any other terms. You know, it's how can we make money out of it.
I suppose my biggest concern, and not really getting too political about it, is that you know, councils are under tremendous pressure to in terms of funding cuts, and what we're actually now seeing is, you know, a number of rangers have lost their jobs.
We're losing 2 of the rangers here. Which are, you know, 2 really experienced people who know the park really well and have put a lot of time and effort into maintaining the park as it is, and which is just heartbreaking, really.
And the council are obviously hoping that the volunteers are going to pick up that slack.
Anyone involved in wildlife conservation knows that money is really, really tight, you know, and being squeezed all the time. So not having enough money to manage the site properly is always a challenge.
I do fear perhaps a little bit for the future as to, you know, if we can't maintain the park, what will actually happen to it.
I think it could be developed so much more. Bedford Park have storytelling and things there. This feels much more of a country park here, and it would be good to encourage more families to come out and use it in other areas, in other ways.
I think it should be part of everybody's education, really, growing up. it would be great to see more school groups coming out to places like this and learning about the environment and giving them a good grounding, so that they have an understanding of why these places are great, and we need to keep and look after them.
I think the modern world comes to be quite detached from the natural world, and the natural world is kind of suffering as a consequence. So I think if you can get even relatively small sites like this on people's doorstep, that it helps to promote them, helps people to even learn a little bit about them and value them, and then hopefully want to protect them going forward, so we don't lose even more green space.
Well, I think, there's opportunities for expansion. There's other gravel pits that are in the area. You only have to look in terms of where the new bypass has been built, that two small flood relief lakes were created, and they're already being colonised by the animals, by the ducks, by the birds, and of course by the fishermen. Absolutely fantastic. And I think it's incumbent upon ourselves that as we continue to build, which is going to happen because there is a housing crisis, that we build sensibly, but also take note of what we need to do to create a safe but manageable wetlands area.